Interesting move having Brandon Sanderson go out there and slam streaming shows of epic fantasy. This is a weird timing of a press tour, and I feel like it's an intentional thing right now because I know how the media works and how PR people work, of Sanderson trying to get the topic off of his new book, Wind and Truth, because of the crazy homosexual virtue signaling, transgender virtue signaling in there that have his upset fans. And so they're trying to have him talk about anything but that, right? So they asked him just like about his works getting adapted into film. And this is the entire interview is just about this and nothing else. Definite puff piece to do this. And what these PR firms do, by the way, is they put stuff like this out there from major media outlets because those get at the top of the Google algorithm because they're marked as news, therefore they're important. So when you search Brandon Sanderson, stuff like my videos don't come up talking about his, crazy, terrible Wind and Truth, LGBTQ propaganda stuff and violation of his Mormon faith by doing that. Instead, it starts to flood the top of the search results with this stuff. Will it get made into movies? So it makes it look like fans are out there asking that. That's how these things work with the mainstream media. And that's why we're fighting the mainstream media every single day here and talking about things that matter to you, my friends. So please hit the like and subscribe button as we talk about all things in fantasy culture. And I really appreciate you guys for being there. This is a wonderful, wonderful year we're having so far. You guys have been amazing, and you've been amazing readers. Like ever since I've been covering this, this has been like a perennial bestseller. For Steam and Country, this is My Adventures of Baron von Monocle. It's a 6-book series thus far. And it's about an airship crew going out and fighting monsters, and then eventually they get into a war and have to, really grow up fast. And it's really a beautiful story. 6 wonderful books. They get better with each and every book and each and every installment, my friend. And that's what we're trying to do here is build some good, clean fantasy for you to enjoy. So check it out. It's in the description below. It's available on ebook, print, and audio, the whole series. Grab it all, guys, today and start reading. It's wonderful stuff. And it's clean. It's good for the whole family, unlike Brandon Sanderson's recent stuff. So, yikes! This is what happens when people get big in the media. Now, really, really funny. He slammed the Wheel of Time and Rings of Power in this interview, but very much dodges why those shows are so bad and what's actually the problem with all these things in epic fantasy streaming that start. And it's called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the same crap that you're putting into your books. That's why people aren't liking your current books. Your old books were a lot of fun. I loved the Mistborn trilogy, really did. And actually loved, the Wax and Wayne sequels too, as much as those weren't as well hailed. But I love, obviously I'm big into like the steampunk setting sort of thing, so that made me happy, right? But these days he's putting more and more wokeism into his books, tokenism into his books, and it clouds things. It makes it muddy. It makes things bloated. That's exactly what's happened with these streaming shows, and that's why they're not able to capture the fantasy, because they're not just focusing on being consistent with the books, being consistent with what heroism is. They're trying for a modern storytelling thing, which is all about identity politics, and that's why it fails. But of course, we're not going to hear that from Sanderson. We're going to hear something completely different here. So Brandon Sanderson is on a media tour after his controversial Wind and Truth, wrapping up his Stormlight Archive epic fantasy series. In a new interview, he takes shots at the recent adaptations like The Wheel of Time and Rings of Power, saying streaming hasn't figured out epic fantasy yet. Neither have modern epic fantasy authors, from what I can tell. I almost want to write epic fantasy like as a result, but I've got too many series already in the pipeline. I don't want to R.R. Martin you guys. Epic fantasy has been in dire straits on its own without streaming services. George R.R. Martin has proven unable to finish his Song of Ice and Fire. Patrick Rothfuss similarly can't bring himself to work on his series. Do you guys remember Patrick Rothfuss? Remember the grifting he's done? Oh my gosh. Leave a comment in the description below if you were disappointed by that one. Love to hear from you. Brandon Sanderson has taken his Stormlight Archive and turned it into an LGBTQ propaganda piece with modernisms and poor writings. So Sanderson's doing a media tour in light of the LGBTQ controversy that's turned off a lot of fans from his work. He recently conducted an interview with Polygon, bizarrely all about what he would like to see for his works if they were adapted into film. With no film projects on the horizon anytime soon, and he does mention one, but it's not exactly. It appears as if the object is to get the discussion of him off of homosexuality with Wind and Truth, just like I was saying at the beginning of this video. So, when asked about it, Sanderson voiced his right analysis, and he was correct about this, that streaming services have done terrible jobs with epic fantasy. He says, streaming has had a big problem with epic fantasy and has me worried. Rings of Power and Wheel of Time have not gone as well as I've hoped. Now, talk about being diplomatic about this. But you can read between the lines here of what that means. Rings of Power sucks. Wheel of Time sucks. They're terrible. Amazon Prime Video, everything they touch turns to crap, and it's diverse crap at that. And that's exactly where you if you start to think about this, you go, wait a minute, Brandon Sanderson is talking about how these things are bad, like everybody else is. Remember how the left loves to just gaslight and say Rings of Power is fantastic, etc. And they always do this and say, oh, you're just review bombing. You're just the minority out there. It's not about that. Now it's we've got this fantasy author who's one of the biggest fantasy authors in the world admitting that these are terrible works of fantasy on film, right? And so this is kind of a validating moment because he's obviously on their side, one of them, part of the establishment. He's admitted these are not working out. That's huge. But of course, once you start to think about that, you go, well, why aren't they working out, right? So Shadow and Bone lasted 2 seasons, very strong first season. Streaming has not figured out epic fantasy yet. So he continued on. He said, Rings of Power essentially had unlimited budget and creative control, and it's not very good. That's the understatement of the year right there. And that's the problem. You need constraints are always good for art, by the way. It's fine, but is this the thing you want? No, it's not fine. It's not very good. I see, and this is how he's trying to be not controversial within this, which is pretty funny. But here's the problem, and here's Brandon. Here's why it's not the thing you want. Lord of the Rings was very, very much a Middle Earth or Middle Ages England sort of scenario. And so when you take it and you add a black elf and you add the weird Harfoot with a weird black person in the village who every single race the black dwarf. Have you noticed no matter where they are, no matter how secluded they are, there's just one black person in it everywhere. And it's how did they get there? Was there a dwarven Africa tribe somewhere that one of them just moseyed over and got lost? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense because they don't have travel in the way that modern people have travel. So it would be impossible for that to exist. So immediately you get taken out of it and you're going, okay, this doesn't feel right. So you start to look at other things and there's problems. Then you get these writers in there who are not familiar with Tolkien, who are not big Tolkien fans. In fact, it's they go out of their way to hire people who aren't. And they want to go, okay, let's do a strong female lead deal. I know Galadriel's supposed to be a sorceress. Let's make her a badass warrior instead. Right? And so modernisms and the feminism, the BIPOC, whatever they want to do, diversity hires, and of course, the wanting to virtue signal towards homosexuality and the like are what destroy the story. And they did that too, by the way, because at Comic-Con, if you don't remember, the Rings of Power people, somebody said, are we going to see any queer representation? Somebody asked that, and they said, maybe you already have. Yeah, I know. So they implied that one of the characters is stealth gay in it. I guess they're going to come out with that later. That's what they do, and that's what Sanderson did with the Stormlight Archive. He kind of just sprinkled it in there in the first book, just mentioning it once, and then it suddenly by book 5, it's full on. You're reading a gay romance, right? And then you don't want to read it at that point because that's not what epic fantasy is supposed to be about. It's just obvious at that point. Wheel of Time suffered the same diversity casting, and it was a disaster. I don't even know what they were thinking with that. It had nothing. It didn't match the Robert Jordan books whatsoever. It was insulting to fans how bad it was and how just off the rails it went. I can't believe they're still continuing with it. What's happening? Bizarre. So it's all wokeism, and Sanderson won't mention it because he can't, because he's done this himself. In fact, this is the thing. As he's doing this press tour to avoid the fact that people are talking about his books being woke and trying to cover up the SEO, search engine optimization, on the internet with that, it just reminds you again, oh, all this stuff's woke, and that's why it sucks. And that's exactly the whole problem with the publishing industry. Every modern epic fantasy, everything out there these days is the same thing, pushing feminism, pushing all these crazy things on everything. And it's just a disaster. You don't want to read that. It doesn't feel like a fantasy world. It doesn't fit a medieval setting whatsoever, and it does not do well for heroic storytelling. So, yeah, there's my rant, guys. Sorry, I didn't even get through his quote yet. Epic fantasy has responded poorly to too much oversight from above. I thought you said that they have creative control though, so that's it. I think it's the key member is a visionary filmmaker. Yeah, somebody has to really care about the lore, like Peter Jackson did for Lord of the Rings, right? And I think that was the Witcher's problem. You had the visionary; it was Henry Cavill. They didn't want to listen to him. There you go. Yeah, they should have. Absolutely. But gosh, wild. So somebody needs to listen to the fans, Brandon Sanderson, and the people out there who understand fantasy, because you're going off the rails yourself. And this is your intervention, Brandon. This is your intervention, because you kind of know that it doesn't work. You know Rings of Power doesn't work. You know Wheel of Time's not working. But you're not asking why. And the why is wokeness right there. Isaac Young is a great author. And if you haven't checked him out, follow him on X. This is him here. And he pointed this out. He said a beautiful thing. The oversight doesn't matter. The West has destroyed the very things that would give a visionary vision, right? We can't do fantasy anymore because fantasy belongs to a particular people and place, white Christian males. And we have undermined that concept for decades. Yeah, I'll say it out loud. I know a lot of people won't, but I don't mince words here. That's why I'm canceled. But I'm right, and that's the thing. And so unless fantasy decides to get back on track and decides to actually get back to its roots, honor Western civilization again, it's never going to work again, because the whole genre is dependent on those mores, and those mores come from one place, and that's Christendom, Brandon. It doesn't come from LGBTQ representation. Leave a comment down below with what you think about this. Hit the like and subscribe button. Please check out my book and my series, guys. You're going to love this as it goes along. Really appreciate everybody who's been reading so far. The best is yet to come. I'm writing some amazing stuff right now. I'm very, very happy with. And so I hope you'll check this out. Get on my newsletter so you don't miss my new releases. And we'll be back soon.